The cafeteria fell silent the moment she entered. Zurith kept her eyes forward, pretending not to notice how conversations died mid-sentence or how chairs scraped against metal floors as people shifted away. Her forearms carried the standard meal tray with practiced ease, but her lower pair trembled slightly. 3 months aboard the intergalactic research station Kepler, and nothing had changed. She was Krevnathi, one of only 200 of her species left in the known galaxy. The war had seen to that. Never mind that she had been 7 years old when it ended. Never mind that the Krevnathi government had surrendered unconditionally and paid reparations for 2 decades. To everyone else on this station, she was the enemy. Zurith scanned the crowded cafeteria. Every table had at least one empty seat, yet no one met her gaze. A Tuluvian scientist suddenly became fascinated with his datapad. 2 Orothian mechanics found urgent reasons to leave their half-eaten meals. She had learned to expect this. What still surprised her was how much it hurt. She moved toward an isolated corner table when something unexpected happened. A human sat down at a table directly in her path and gestured to the empty seat across from him. Zurith froze. Humans were wild cards in galactic society. Newcomers who had joined the Intergalactic Council only 15 years ago. They had quickly gained a reputation for being simultaneously brilliant and completely unpredictable. This one wore the gray uniform of the engineering division with grease stains on his sleeves and calluses on his hands. "You going to stand there all day or sit down?" he asked, not looking up from the mechanical component he was examining. His voice carried a slight drawl, relaxed and unbothered. Zareth's throat went dry. This had to be a mistake. "The seat is available?" Wouldn't have offered if it wasn't. He finally glanced up, revealing brown eyes that held no hostility, no fear, just mild curiosity. "Name's Danny Cooper. You're Zareth, right?" "The quantum physics specialist." She managed a nod, slowly lowering herself into the seat. Her 4 hands gripped the tray tightly. Around them, she could feel the weight of dozens of stares. "Thought so. Read your paper on dark matter resonance fields. Pretty solid work." Danny pulled out a small toolkit and began disassembling the component with practiced efficiency. "You were wrong about the calibration threshold, though. It's 0.73, not 0.8. The casual criticism startled her more than anything else had in months. People either avoided her completely or were excessively polite, carefully neutral. No one simply talked to her like a colleague. "I ran the simulation 17 times, Zareth said, her defensive tone automatic. "Sure, but did you account for quantum drift and prolonged exposure?" Danny raised an eyebrow. "Your math is fine." "Your baseline assumptions were off." Before she could respond, he slid a datapad across the table. The screen showed complex equations with annotations in neat handwriting. Zareth scanned the first few lines and felt her secondary heart skip a beat. He was right. "How did you—" "I'm an engineer. I test theories in the real world." Danny reassembled the component with quick, efficient movements. "Theory says one thing. Metal and electricity say another. I trust the metal." For the first time in 3 months, Zareth felt something other than crushing loneliness. It was small, tentative, but it felt like hope. The quantum research lab hummed with the low-frequency vibration that always made Zareth's sensory frills tingle. She stood at her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing particle collision data, when Danny walked in without knocking. He carried a crate of equipment that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. "Morning," he said cheerfully, setting the crate down with a metallic clang that made her flinch. "Brought you something." Zareth glanced at the doorway nervously. The lab was her sanctuary, the one place where she could work undisturbed because no one wanted to share space with her. Having Danny here felt like inviting danger, even though he had eaten lunch with her every day for the past 2 weeks. "What is this?" she asked, eyeing the equipment suspiciously. "Prototype resonance chamber. Built it based on your paper with my corrections." He grinned, completely unaware or uncaring of the breach in social protocol his presence represented. Figured we could test your theory properly instead of just running simulations. Her 4 hands stilled over her work.
We? You're the theorist. I'm the engineer.
Makes sense to team up. Danny was already unpacking components, laying them out with the confidence of someone who had never been made to feel unwelcome anywhere. Unless you've got a problem with collaboration? Zareth's mind raced. Collaboration meant shared credit, joint papers, her name linked with his in academic databases. It meant someone vouching for her work, her competence, her right to be here. It also meant risking his reputation. The others won't like it, she said quietly. You sitting with me was one thing. Working together is different. Danny paused, a quantum capacitor in his hand, and looked at her directly. Do I look like I care what they think? You should. They could make your life difficult. Let them try. He set the capacitor down and crossed his arms. Look, I've been on this station for 8 months. Know what I've learned? Most of these people are more concerned with politics than progress. They'd rather maintain comfortable prejudices than acknowledge good work when they see it. It's not prejudice, Zareth said, the words bitter on her tongue. My people killed millions. The war ended before you hit puberty, Danny interrupted. You personally kill anyone? No, but design any weapons? Plan any attacks? Vote for war? I was a child. Exactly. He returned to unpacking equipment. So unless we're holding children accountable for their government's actions, I don't see the problem. Your work is good. That's all that matters to me. Zareth felt something crack inside her chest, some defensive wall she had built and maintained through years of isolation. Why are you doing this? Danny shrugged. Back on Earth, I grew up in a small town. Not much diversity. Lots of people who thought like their parents thought, who thought like their grandparents thought. Never sat right with me. He connected 2 components with practiced ease. Besides, you're smart and you make me think differently. Why wouldn't I want to work with you? Before Zareth could respond, the lab door opened. She recognized the newcomer immediately. Gregory Hunt, the station's head of theoretical physics and her nominal superior. His expression when he saw Danny was carefully neutral, but his eyes went cold when they landed on Zareth. Cooper, Hunt said, ignoring her completely, didn't expect to find you here. Running an experiment, Danny replied, not looking up from his work. Zareth and I are testing some quantum resonance theories. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Hunt's jaw tightened. I see. Cooper, might I have a word? In private, kinda busy right now. It's important. Danny sighed and straightened. Fine. Zareth, start running the preliminary calibrations. I'll be back in 5 minutes. He followed Hunt into the corridor and through the transparent aluminum walls. Zareth could see their conversation. Hunt's body language was aggressive, pointing and gesturing emphatically. Danny stood with his arms crossed, face impassive. The conversation lasted nearly 10 minutes, Hunt's face growing redder as Danny remained unmoved. When Danny returned, his expression was carefully controlled. Where were we? What did he say? Zareth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing worth repeating. Danny picked up where he left off, but Zareth noticed the tightness around his eyes, the way his movements were just slightly more forceful than necessary. Danny, he suggested I reconsider my choice of collaborators, Danny said flatly. Said it would be better for my career to work with more established researchers. Implied that associating with you would damage my reputation and limit my opportunities for advancement. Zareth's heart sank. He's probably right. He's definitely wrong. Danny connected the final component and powered up the device. Know what humanity learned after centuries of stupid conflicts? That prejudice is just fear wearing a fancy mask. Hunt's afraid that if your work succeeds, it challenges his comfortable worldview. Easier to dismiss you than admit he might have been wrong. The resonance chamber began to glow with a soft blue light, particles aligning in patterns that made Zareth's educated eye widen. The readings were impossible, far beyond what her simulations had predicted. "Does this?" "Yeah," Danny said, a grin spreading across his face. "I think we just proved your theory and doubled the expected resonance efficiency." Zareth stared at the readings, then at Danny, then back at the impossible data scrolling across her screens. 3 months of isolation had made her forget what this felt like. The pure joy of discovery, the satisfaction of being right, the thrill of pushing the boundaries of known science. "We need to run it again," she said, her voice steadier now. "Control the variables. Eliminate possible error sources. Now you're talking." Danny reset the equipment. "How about we run a full series?" I cleared my schedule for the day. As they worked, falling into an easy rhythm of theoretical prediction and practical testing, Zareth realized something had shifted. For the first time since boarding the station, she wasn't just surviving. She was doing the work she loved, with someone who saw her as a colleague rather than a symbol of past atrocities. The data came in waves, each result more fascinating than the last. Danny suggested modifications, Zareth calculated probabilities, and together they pushed the experiment in directions neither had considered alone. Hours passed, unmarked except by the growing stack of successful test runs and the coffee that Danny periodically retrieved from the cafeteria. "You know they're going to talk," Zareth said during one of their brief breaks. "Let them talk." Danny stretched, his spine cracking audibly. "When we publish this, they'll have to acknowledge the work regardless of their feelings. If we publish together." "When," Danny corrected. "When we publish together." "This is collaborative work, Zareth. Your name goes on it, just like mine." She wanted to argue, to protect him from the fallout she knew would come, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she asked, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" Danny considered the question seriously. "My grandmother used to say fear and ignorance are best friends. Get to know someone, really know them, and fear doesn't have anywhere to hide." He gestured at the lab equipment around them. "I know you're brilliant. I know you're dedicated. I know you care about getting the science right more than you care about getting credit. That's who you are. Everything else is just noise." The simple acceptance in his words threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. Zareth turned back to her screens, blinking rapidly. "Thank you," she managed. "For what?" "For seeing me." Danny's expression softened. "Everyone deserves that, Zareth. Everyone." They worked until the station's lights dimmed for night cycle, surrounded by proof that their collaboration was more than just an act of social rebellion. It was producing real, groundbreaking results. And for Zareth, it was proving something even more important, that she wasn't defined by her species' history. She was defined by her choices, her work, and the connections she chose to build. As they cleaned up the lab, preparing to continue tomorrow, Zareth realized the weight she had carried for 3 months felt lighter. Not gone, but bearable. And that was enough to hope for more. News of their successful experiment spread through the station faster than Zareth had anticipated. By the next morning, the quantum research lab had become a focal point of attention, though not the kind either researcher had hoped for. Zareth arrived to find a small crowd gathered outside, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. She kept her head down, pushing through the group with practiced efficiency. Inside, Danny was already setting up for their second round of testing, looking completely unbothered by the attention. "Morning," he called out. "Ready for round 2? Before Zareth could respond, 3 senior researchers entered the lab. She recognized all of them. Hunt, naturally, along with Caroline Price from astrophysics and Marcus Lynn from experimental physics. The delegation looked official and unwelcoming. "We need to discuss your experiment," Hunt said without preamble. Danny glanced up from his calibrations. "What about it?" "There are concerns about the validity of your methodology," Price said, her tone carefully professional but laced with skepticism. "We'd like to review your data before you proceed further." The data's solid, Danny replied. Ran it through verification protocols twice. Everything checks out. Lynn stepped forward, his expression more sympathetic than the others. Cooper, no one's questioning your technical competence. But given the controversial nature of this collaboration, we need to ensure everything is beyond reproach. Surely you understand. Zereth understood perfectly. They weren't questioning the science. They were questioning her involvement in it. Her 4 hands clenched into fists beneath the table where no one could see. What's controversial about 2 scientists working together? Danny asked, his voice taking on an edge. You know exactly what we're talking about, Hunt said, finally acknowledging Zereth's presence with a cold glare. This station has protocols about research partnerships. We need to verify that proper procedures were followed. Which procedures? Danny crossed his arms. The ones about collaborative research? Filed the paperwork yesterday. The ones about equipment requisition? All approved through standard channels. Or maybe you mean the unwritten procedures about who's allowed to work with whom. The air in the lab grew tense. Price's professional mask slipped slightly. Your attitude isn't helping, Cooper. Neither is your barely concealed prejudice, but here we are. Marcus Lynn held up a hand. Let's keep this civil. Cooper, we're simply asking for a chance to review the work independently. Standard peer review process. After one successful test? Danny raised an eyebrow. That's not standard procedure and you know it. We're not publishing yet, just running experiments. Since when do we need committee approval for that? Hunt's face flushed. Since you decided to partner with someone whose people what? Danny interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut. Whose people fought a war that ended 15 years ago? Whose people lost and paid the price? Or are you going to finish that sentence with something even more revealing about your actual concerns here? The silence that followed was deafening. Zereth stood frozen, watching her worst fears play out in real time. This was why isolation had been safer. This confrontation, this tension, this proof that her very existence was a problem to be managed rather than a colleague to be respected. I'll withdraw from the project, she heard herself say. All eyes turned to her. If it's my involvement that's causing issues, I'll step back. Danny can continue the research alone. Absolutely not, Danny said immediately. It would be simpler. It would be wrong. Danny turned to face the 3 senior researchers. Here's what's going to happen. Zereth and I are going to continue our work. You're welcome to review our data when we're ready to publish, like everyone else. But if you think I'm going to abandon a promising research partnership because you can't get past your own biases, you're mistaken. Hunt's expression darkened. You're making a serious mistake, Cooper. This station runs on cooperation and mutual respect. Burning bridges with senior staff over this is foolish. Funny, I thought mutual respect went both ways, Danny shot back. Seems to me the only bridge burning happening here is the one you're setting fire to because you can't handle the idea of a Krebnathi doing good science. How dare you? Hunt started. How dare I what? Point out the obvious? You haven't questioned my methodology, my equipment, or my results. You've only questioned my choice of collaborator. That tells me everything I need to know about your real concerns. Caroline Price tried a different approach. Cooper, be reasonable. Think about your future here. The station director listens to senior staff recommendations. Your career could suffer from this stubbornness. My career will suffer more if I compromise my integrity, Danny replied. And if the station director has a problem with legitimate scientific collaboration, that says more about the director than it does about me. Marcus Lynn sighed. You're both young and idealistic. That's admirable, but reality isn't kind to idealists. The political landscape here is complicated. Then maybe it's time to uncomplicate it, Danny interrupted. Science doesn't care about politics. Results matter, not who generates them. Hunt drew himself up. This conversation is over, but mark my words, Cooper, you will regret this choice. The 3 researchers left, their departure marked by meaningful glances and barely suppressed anger. Danny watched them go, then turned to Xerath with a grim smile. Well, that went about as badly as expected. Xerath's voice shook. You should have let me withdraw. I told you this would happen. And I told you I don't care what they think. Danny returned to the equipment setup. Besides, I meant what I said. The work matters more than the politics. Your career is mine to manage. He looked at her seriously. Xerath, I need you to understand something. Back on Earth, we had to learn some hard lessons about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. If I backed down every time someone disapproved of my choices, I'd never do anything worthwhile. But they could force you to stop the project. They could reassign you. Let them try. I'm good at what I do, and they know it. The station needs engineers who can actually fix things, not just theorize about them. He fired up the resonance chamber. Now, are we going to let them intimidate us? Or are we going to prove that our work stands on its own merits? Xerath stared at the equipment, then at Danny, then at the door through which the senior staff had left. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to retreat into isolation where she couldn't hurt anyone or be hurt. But something else, something newer and more fragile, whispered that maybe Danny was right. Maybe the work did matter more than the politics. We continue, she said quietly. Damn right we do, Danny grinned. Now, I've been thinking about the resonance patterns we saw yesterday. If we adjust the quantum field alignment by 0.2 degrees, we might be able to increase efficiency even further. They fell back into their work, but the tension from the confrontation lingered. Xerath found herself glancing at the door frequently, half expecting Hunt to return with security or an official cease and desist order. But the hours passed without interruption, and slowly, the familiar rhythm of experimental work helped ease her anxiety. The results from their second round of testing were even better than the first. The resonance chamber was achieving efficiency levels that shouldn't have been theoretically possible, opening up new questions about quantum field interactions that would take months to fully explore. This is incredible, Xerath breathed, watching the particle patterns dance across her screens. If we can replicate this at scale, we'd revolutionize power generation across half the galaxy, Danny finished. Yeah, I know. Kind of makes Hunt's little power play seem petty in comparison. As the station's lights began to dim for night cycle, they finally shut down the equipment. Danny stretched and yawned, joints popping audibly. Same time tomorrow? He asked. Xerath hesitated. Are you sure? After today, I'm more sure than ever. Danny's expression was firm. They showed their cards, Xerath. They've got nothing but bluster and outdated prejudice. Our work speaks for itself. It won't be easy. The best things never are. He headed for the door, then paused. Hey, Xerath, thanks for not backing down. She managed a small smile. Thank you for not letting me. After he left, Xerath remained in the lab, staring at the data they had generated. 2 days of work, and they had already achieved results that would have taken her months alone. But more than the scientific success, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The sense that she wasn't facing the universe alone. The opposition would intensify, she knew that. Hunt and his allies wouldn't simply accept defeat. But for the first time since boarding this station, Xerath felt ready to fight back. Not with anger or resentment, but with the one weapon they couldn't dismiss: undeniable scientific excellence. She allowed herself a moment of hope before powering down the lab lights and heading to her quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it would also bring new discoveries, and she wouldn't face them alone. The following week proved Danny's predictions correct. The pushback against their collaboration intensified in ways both overt and subtle. Equipment requisitions that should have taken hours began taking days. Lab time that had been freely available suddenly required extensive justification. Xerath's access to certain databases was questioned and temporarily suspended pending review. Through it all, Danny remained infuriatingly cheerful and absolutely immovable. "They think bureaucracy will wear us down," he explained during lunch, which they now took together despite the obvious discomfort it caused others in the cafeteria. Classic administrative warfare. Make it harder to work than to quit. Zareth pushed her food around her tray. "It's working. We've lost 3 days of lab time this week alone. So we adapt." Danny pulled out his personal datapad. "I've been talking to some contacts back on Earth. There's a private research foundation that might be interested in funding our work independently. We wouldn't need the station's resources. That would take months to arrange. Then we fight for the lab time while we wait." He grinned. "I'm stubborn that way." Their conversation was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. A Tuluvian named Kevin Morris, one of the station's mid-level engineers, approached their table hesitantly. He stood there for a long moment, tray in hand, clearly debating with himself. "This seat taken?" he finally asked. Danny and Zareth exchanged surprised glances. "No," Danny said carefully. "Go ahead." Kevin sat down, still looking uncomfortable but determined. "I've been watching what's happening, the way they're treating you both." He kept his voice low. "It's not right." Zareth tensed, waiting for the inevitable qualification, the explanation of why it was somehow justified despite being wrong. But it didn't come. "I read your preliminary findings," Kevin continued. "The resonance efficiency numbers are revolutionary. If you can scale that technology, it would change everything." He looked directly at Zareth for the first time. That's what should matter. Not politics, not history, just the work. "Thank you," Zareth managed, unsure how else to respond. "Don't thank me yet. I'm just one voice." Kevin glanced around the cafeteria nervously. "But you should know, not everyone agrees with Hunt. Some of us think what he's doing is petty and counterproductive, but not enough to speak up," Danny observed, though his tone was more curious than accusatory. Captain winced. "No, not yet, anyway. It's complicated. Hunt has a lot of influence, and most people don't want to risk their careers over principle." He paused. "I'm not proud of that, but I thought you should know you're not completely alone." After Kevin left, Zareth felt a strange mixture of hope and frustration. One ally, better than none. "It's how movements start," Danny said. "One person, then another. Then suddenly everyone wonders why they ever went along with the old way of thinking." That evening, Zareth returned to her quarters to find a message waiting. The sender was anonymous, but the content was clear. A detailed thread explaining exactly what would happen if she didn't voluntarily leave the station. Her career would be destroyed, her reputation ruined, and any scientist who worked with her would face similar consequences. She stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Part of her wanted to show Danny, to prove that his optimism was misplaced. But another part, the part that had kept her surviving through years of isolation, whispered that this was exactly what they wanted, for her to feel threatened enough to give up. Instead, she pulled up their experimental data and began working on the theoretical framework for their next test. If they were going to face opposition, they would face it with results that couldn't be ignored. The next morning, she found Danny already in the lab, looking unusually serious. "We need to talk." Her heart sank. "You're withdrawing from the project." "What?" "No." He looked genuinely surprised. "Why would you think that? I assumed someone had finally convinced you." "Zareth, I'm not going anywhere. But I did get some interesting news." He pulled up a holographic display. "Remember that private foundation I mentioned? They came through. Faster than I expected." The display showed a formal research grant proposal, already approved, with both their names listed as primary researchers. The funding was substantial, enough to support years of independent work. "How did you—" Turns out one of the foundation directors is a woman named Dr. Lisa Martinez. She's human, former astrophysicist, now runs one of Earth's biggest research endowments. Danny's smile was proud. I sent her our preliminary data. She called me personally to discuss the project. Said it was exactly the kind of boundary-pushing work they wanted to support. Zareth scanned the proposal details, hardly believing what she was seeing. This is enough to build our own lab. We wouldn't need the station's resources at all. Exactly. We could continue the work without dealing with Hunt's interference. Danny leaned against the table. There's a catch, though. Doc Martinez wants to meet us in person. She's proposing we relocate to Earth for the duration of the project. Earth? Zareth's voice came out strangled. I can't go to Earth. Humans barely know my species exists, and what they do know is that the Kreven Nathi were part of a war that ended before most humans even knew there was a galactic community, Danny interrupted. Dr. Martinez knows your species. She knows the history, and she doesn't care. She cares about the science. Zareth sat down heavily. Earth represented the unknown, a world where she would be even more alien than she was here. But it also represented escape from the constant hostility, the daily reminder that her presence was unwelcome. I need time to think about this, she said. Take all the time you need. The offer's open-ended. Danny hesitated. But Zareth, you should know that Hunt found out about the grant proposal. I don't know how, but he knows, and he's not happy. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Hunt appeared at the lab entrance, flanked by 2 security officers. His expression was triumphant in a way that made Zareth's blood run cold. Zareth of Krevnath, Hunt said formally. You're being placed on administrative leave, pending investigation into potential security violations. Danny shot to his feet. What? Security violations? She hasn't done anything wrong. That's for the investigation to determine. Hunt produced a datapad showing official station documentation. Someone flagged unusual data transmissions from her quarters to unknown external sources. Until we can verify she hasn't been sharing classified research, she's suspended from all station activities. Zareth felt numb. I haven't transmitted anything. All my communications have been through standard channels. The logs suggest otherwise. Hunt's smile was cold. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding, but protocol must be followed. Danny stepped between Hunt and Zareth. This is harassment. You're manufacturing charges because you can't stop our research any other way. Careful, Cooper. Making accusations against senior staff is a serious matter. Hunt nodded to the security officers. Zareth, please come with us. Your quarters will be searched as part of the investigation. The security officers weren't hostile, but they were firm. Zareth found herself being escorted out of the lab while Danny argued vehemently with Hunt. As they led her down the corridor, she could hear Danny's raised voice demanding to speak with the station director, threatening to contact the Intergalactic Council about discrimination. Her quarters were indeed searched, thoroughly and invasively, every personal item examined, every data device confiscated. The security officers were professional but distant, treating her like a suspect rather than a colleague. When they finally left, her living space looked like it had been hit by a storm. Zareth sat on her sleeping platform and finally allowed the tears to come. She had been foolish to hope, foolish to think that good work would be enough to overcome prejudice. Danny had meant well, but his optimism had blinded him to the reality of the situation. Some battles couldn't be won. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. She almost didn't answer, but the chime sounded again, insistent. Danny stood outside, looking furious and determined. Are you okay? How did you get past security? Told them I was bringing you official documents, which I am. He handed her a datapad. Transfer orders. Approved by the station director himself. You and I are officially reassigned to Earth, effective immediately, to continue our research under the Martinez Foundation grant. Zareth stared at the orders. How? I called Dr. Martinez. She called the Intergalactic Council. The council called the station director. Turns out, when you accuse someone of security violations without evidence, Especially when that someone is working on a council-approved research project, people get interested in your motivations. Danny's grin was fierce. Hunt tried to bury you. Instead, he just gave us the perfect excuse to leave this place behind. Earth, Zareth whispered. I'll be the only Krevnathi on the entire planet. Probably, Danny admitted. But you'll also be somewhere that judges you on your work, not your species. Dr. Martinez made that very clear. She doesn't care about galactic politics. She cares about advancing human knowledge, and she thinks our project can do that. Zareth looked around her ransacked quarters, then back at the transfer orders. When do we leave? Transport ship departs in 6 hours. I already packed your research materials from the lab. Everything else? Well, he shrugged. New start, right? As they walked through the station for the last time, Zareth noticed the stairs were different now. Some still held hostility, but others showed confusion, maybe even a hint of shame. Kevin Morris caught her eye in the corridor and gave a small nod of respect. At the docking bay, Hunt was waiting. He looked like he had swallowed something bitter. This isn't over, Cooper. You're right, it's not, Danny agreed. But it's over for you. The station director is conducting a formal review of your conduct, something about misuse of authority and falsifying security concerns. You might want to start packing your own things. Hunt's face went pale, then red. Before he could respond, Danny guided Zareth past him and onto the transport ship. As the station grew smaller in the viewport, Zareth felt the weight of 3 months of isolation begin to lift. She was heading into the unknown, to a planet full of humans who might not accept her any more than the station crew had. But she wouldn't be facing it alone. Danny stood beside her, already pulling up their research notes, already planning their next experiment. Earth's going to love you, he said confidently. Trust me. For the first time in years, Zareth did trust. Not just in Danny's words, but in the possibility that somewhere in the vast galaxy there might be a place where she could simply be a scientist, not a symbol of a war she never fought. The transport ship engaged its faster-than-light drive, and Kepler's station disappeared in a flash of blue light. Ahead lay Earth, and with it the chance to prove that the future didn't have to be defined by the past. The transport journey to Earth took 5 days, during which Zareth experienced a strange mixture of anxiety and excitement. Danny spent most of the trip briefing her on human culture, though his explanations often left her more confused than enlightened. So humans celebrate the anniversary of their birth by eating sweet food and setting it on fire? She asked, reviewing one of his cultural briefings. Candles on a cake, yeah? It's symbolic. Don't overthink it. Danny was sprawled across his bunk, reading through their research data for the dozenth time. Point is, humans have weird traditions, but we're generally friendly once you get past the initial awkwardness. You keep saying that, but the data suggests humans have historically been quite hostile to outsiders. True, but we've gotten better. Mostly. He glanced up. Look, there will be stares. People will be curious. Some might be nervous. But outright hostility? Rare these days, especially in scientific communities. Dr. Martinez had sent several messages during the journey, each one professionally enthusiastic about their upcoming arrival. She had arranged quarters for them at the research facility, lab space equipped with cutting-edge technology, and even assigned them a small support staff. The warmth of her communications stood in stark contrast to the cold bureaucracy of Kepler Station. When the transport finally entered Earth's atmosphere, Zareth pressed against the viewport, staring at the blue and green planet below. She had seen thousands of worlds in her studies, but something about Earth felt different. Maybe it was the promise of a fresh start, or maybe it was the way Danny described his homeworld with genuine affection. The research facility was located in what Danny called Colorado, in the mountains near an old city named Denver. The building itself was modern, all glass and steel, designed to blend with the dramatic mountain landscape. As they disembarked, Zareth noticed the air was thinner here than station standard, but not uncomfortably so. Dr. Lisa Martinez was waiting at the landing pad, a woman in her 60s with gray-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She approached them with a wide smile and extended her hand to Danny, then to Xerath without hesitation. "Welcome to Earth," she said warmly. "I'm Lisa. We're thrilled to have you both here." Xerath carefully shook the offered hand, mimicking the gesture she had seen Danny use countless times. "Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Martinez. Please, call me Lisa. We don't stand on formality here." She gestured toward the facility. "Let me show you around. I think you'll find our equipment exceeds what you had access to at Kepler." The lab space was indeed impressive. State-of-the-art quantum field generators, particle accelerators, and computing power that made Kepler's systems look primitive. Xerath found herself moving from station to station, her 4 hands hovering over controls she had only dreamed of accessing. "This is a military-grade resonance chamber," she breathed. "How did you acquire this?" "Connections," Lisa said with a wink, "and a very persuasive argument to the Department of Energy about potential civilian applications. They're interested in your research, Xerath." Clean, efficient power generation would solve a lot of Earth's remaining energy problems. Over the next few weeks, Xerath and Danny threw themselves into their work with renewed energy. Without the constant interference and hostility of Kepler Station, their progress accelerated dramatically. The resonance chamber experiments that had been promising before now yielded results that bordered on revolutionary. The research facility staff treated Xerath with professional courtesy, curiosity tempered with respect. A young intern named Sophie Chen was assigned to assist them, and she proved both competent and genuinely fascinated by Xerath's unique perspective on quantum mechanics. "Your species processes mathematical concepts differently than we do," Sophie observed during one late-night session. "The way you visualize quantum states, it's like you can see dimensions we can only calculate." "Krevnathi neural structure is slightly different," Xerath explained. "We have an additional lobe dedicated to spatial reasoning in multiple dimensions. It makes certain types of physics more intuitive." "That's incredible," Sophie said, and her enthusiasm was genuine. "No wonder your theoretical work is so advanced." These casual interactions, free from underlying hostility, gradually eroded Xerath's defensive barriers. She found herself laughing at Danny's terrible jokes, engaging in friendly debates with Sophie about theoretical implications, and even joining the staff for communal meals without the crushing anxiety she had felt at Kepler. 3 months into their residency, they achieved a major breakthrough. The resonance chamber reached efficiency levels of 92%, far exceeding anything previously thought possible. Danny and Xerath stood side by side, watching the particle flows dance across their displays in perfect harmony. "We did it," Danny said quietly. "This is going to change everything." Xerath nodded, unable to find words. The work was vindication, proof that her ideas had merit, that she could contribute something meaningful to galactic science. But it was more than that. It was proof that Danny had been right to take a chance on her, that collaboration could overcome prejudice, that the future didn't have to repeat the past. Lisa arranged for them to present their findings at a major scientific conference in Geneva. The prospect terrified Xerath. Standing in front of hundreds of human scientists being scrutinized and judged felt like inviting disaster. "What if they reject the research because of who I am?" she asked Danny the night before their presentation. "Then they're idiots who don't deserve to benefit from our work," he replied. "But they won't. The data speaks for itself." The conference hall was massive, filled with some of Earth's brightest scientific minds. As Xerath walked onto the stage, she could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. The room fell silent, curiosity evident on every face. Danny started the presentation with their methodology, explaining the theoretical framework that Xerath had developed. Then Xerath took over, walking through the experimental results with all 4 hands gesturing to emphasize key points. She had worried her appearance would distract from her words, but as she fell into the familiar rhythm of explaining her work, the audience leaned forward, engaged and fascinated. When they reached the efficiency numbers, someone in the audience gasped audibly. The questions that followed were sharp, skeptical in the best scientific tradition, demanding proof and replication data. Zareth and Danny fielded each one with confidence backed by months of rigorous testing. The standing ovation at the end was unexpected. Zareth stood frozen as hundreds of humans rose to their feet, applauding not just politely but enthusiastically. Several scientists rushed the stage afterward, peppering them with questions about collaboration, opportunities, and potential applications. A distinguished older man introduced himself as Dr. Robert Kim from Seoul National University. "This is the most exciting development in quantum physics I've seen in 30 years, he said. "I would be honored to collaborate on scaling this technology." Others echoed similar sentiments. By the end of the conference, Zareth and Danny had received 17 collaboration requests, 3 job offers, and invitations to present at a dozen more institutions. That evening, as they celebrated with Lisa and the research team at a restaurant overlooking Geneva's lake, Zareth felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine belonging. These people valued her for her mind, her contributions, her potential. Not despite her species, but independent of it. "I told you Earth would love you," Danny said, raising his glass in a toast. "You were right," Zareth admitted, "about many things." Lisa smiled. "You two have accomplished something remarkable. And not just scientifically. You've shown that collaboration across species, across histories, across prejudices, produces better results than isolation. That's a lesson humanity learned the hard way, and we're glad to share it." As the celebration continued, Zareth found herself thinking about Kepler Station, about Hunt and the others who had made her life miserable. She didn't feel anger anymore, just a distant pity. They had let fear and prejudice blind them to opportunity, and in doing so, they had lost the chance to be part of something groundbreaking. Back at the research facility late that night, Zareth stood in the lab alone, looking at the resonance chamber that had proven her theories correct. 6 months ago, she had been isolated, invisible, barely surviving. Now she was a respected scientist with collaborators eager to work with her, with research that would impact billions of lives across multiple species. The door opened, and Danny entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you'd still be here. Just thinking about how one person sitting down at a cafeteria table changed everything." Danny handed her a cup. "It wasn't just me. You did the work. You had the courage to keep trying even when everything seemed hopeless. I just gave you a chance to show what you were capable of." "That's what everyone deserves," Zareth said, echoing words he had spoken to her months ago. "A chance to be seen for who they are." "Exactly," Danny smiled. "So, what's next?" "We've got a dozen institutions wanting to work with us. Unlimited funding and the most advanced research facility on Earth at our disposal." Zareth considered the question. What was next? More research, certainly. Publishing their findings, collaborating with the best minds humanity had to offer, pushing the boundaries of quantum physics even further. But beyond that, something more. "I want to create opportunities for others," she said slowly. "Other scientists who face discrimination, who are excluded because of species or history or politics. If we can prove that merit matters more than background, maybe we can change how the scientific community operates." Danny's grin widened. "Now you're thinking like a revolutionary." "I love it." They stood together in the quiet lab, 2 scientists from different worlds who had found common ground in pursuit of knowledge. Outside, Earth rotated into night, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those stars was Kepler Station, continuing its work without them. Somewhere else was Krevnath, the homeworld Zareth barely remembered. But here, in this moment, Zareth was exactly where she needed to be, standing beside someone who saw her not as a representative of a fallen empire or a reminder of past wars, but as a colleague, a friend, and a brilliant scientist with unlimited potential. The future was unwritten, full of possibilities, and for the first time in her life, Zara felt ready to write it on her own terms, one discovery at a time.